Hey everyone, welcome to This Prepared Life. I'm Allison, and in today's video, we are going to be packaging up some guacamole that I found on sale and freeze dried. And then we're also going to reconstitute it so that you can see what that process looks like. And I'll do a little taste test at the end for you. So come along as we freeze dry, package, and reconstitute store-bought guacamole. So today I am taking some guacamole that I freeze dried out of the freeze dryer, and I'm going to show you that whole process of jarring it up. And I thought we'd also reconstitute some. So I have already turned my freeze dryer off just because it was so loud and I didn't want that to pick up in the camera. But I am ready to take these trays out. And typically when I'm running a freeze dry load, before I hit the defrost button and tell the machine that it's all done, I will check a tray. So I have already done that because I needed to turn the machine off. So these are dry. They are ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and take these trays out and we're going to head upstairs and get these put into jars. One thing to note about your freeze dryer, some loads will have more accumulation of ice and condensation on the outside. This can start dripping as soon as you turn the machine off. So as you are taking these trays out, you want to make sure that water is not dripping onto the tray, because that drip of water, even just one drip of water, is going to ruin that batch. So let's go ahead and get these upstairs. So this batch I did, these are the little mini guacamole cups, and I just tossed these straight in the freezer. I'd never done this before, so I wasn't sure how it would work, and it worked beautifully. This is totally dry all the way through. I'm going to check a couple more of them upstairs just to make sure, but I ended up freezing these because we were going on vacation and they were expiring while we were on vacation. So I just tossed them in the freezer, and then when we got home, this was a little happy experiment. I also purchased a package of the big tubs of guacamole last time we were at Costco, and they were on sale. So one tub, the package came with 3, but one tub filled a tray. So I have 3 trays of this. Okay, so I have my guacamole upstairs, and I'm going to go ahead and be putting these into small jars rather than Mylar today. I am going to be using oxygen absorbers in the jars, and let's go ahead and get these jarred up. So it is important when you are packaging freeze-dried food, one, obviously that things are clean. Cleanliness is important, but no moisture is probably the most important thing. So make sure your hands are dry, all your utensils are dry, your space is dry. This is a wide mouth jar funnel. I will link it in the description, but one of these is incredibly helpful. This is the one I use for canning, but I also use it for freeze-dried food and getting things into jars. So we're gonna start with these. You can use parchment paper or non-stick mats on your trays. If I'm doing something sticky, I will use parchment paper, but I usually don't find it necessary to use the non-stick mats. So I'm just checking these for any cold spots or spots that might not be done. And I usually check like the thicker pieces, so just to make sure everything's dry. So this one looks good. You could crush this, pulverize it, powder it. I just break it up and toss it in the jar. And I will probably take a spoon to kind of mash it down a little bit. So I am going to go ahead and just put lids on these jars so that they are slightly sealed while I package the rest of this. With freeze-dried food, you do want to work fairly quickly because it can start to absorb moisture from the air depending on how humid your house is or your location. So work fairly quickly. I have my oxygen absorbers over here ready to go, but I am not going to open that package until I'm ready to fill all the jars so that I don't waste any of these, because today I'm using a massive package and I want to be able to reseal this so these don't go to waste. So I'm going to work super quick and get the rest of this into jars, and then I will take you along and show you the process of putting oxygen absorbers in and sealing these jars. Let's take a look at these little mini pucks. These worked really well. Totally dry. I always like to check if you see like a chunk of avocado. Just kind of make sure it's not cold, that it's fully dry and crumbles. Because if these were still moist and we put them into our jar, all of that moisture is then going to reconstitute in the jar. So let's get these jarred up. I'm just going to do these whole. I'm going to add these broken ones into this jar just to get it filled up. I have one more. I'm just going to add that one, and then we're going to save this one and we're going to reconstitute it. So I have my jars all filled, and you may have noticed, or you maybe didn't, I reuse old lids, like used lids, for any of my dry goods. You can't reuse these for water bath canning or pressure canning, but I do reuse them if I'm vacuum sealing jars, or I reuse them if I am using an oxygen absorber to seal a jar. So some of my lids, my flats, as long as they're still in good condition, have been used 4, 5, 6 times. So I get a lot of use out of my flats. So we have these lids on. I'm going to go ahead and clean this space up. Then we're going to start putting oxygen absorbers in these jars, and I'm going to get out my heat sealer. Okay, so this is an impulse sealer or a heat sealer, and it is what I use to seal Mylar bags. I am getting it out right now because I want to reseal this plastic bag. If you don't have an impulse sealer, the next best bet is going to be to put these into jars. And so these are all 100 cc oxygen absorbers. And a pint jar will need 50 cc's, and a quart size jar is going to need 300. So it's okay if you go over. It is not okay to go under. And the cc's are how much oxygen, it's essentially the size of the packet. It's how much oxygen are these little packets going to absorb from your container. So I am going to go ahead and set this at about 4 and get these opened. I'm going to take out the oxygen absorbers I need, reseal this bag so the rest of these don't go to waste. And then we'll get the oxygen absorbers put into our jars. So I just squeezed the air out of this bag as much as I could get, and I always seal it twice. That may be a little overkill. The bags should have an indicator in them, and it's usually pink. If this turns to purple, it means these have been exposed to air. But something to note, oftentimes these will change to purple, and then after you seal the bag, it will return to pink. So understanding what a good oxygen absorber feels like is important. They should be soft. Okay, let's get this out of the way. So I'm gonna go ahead and open these jars. The quarts need 300, so we're gonna put 3 100 cc's. I'm also gonna wipe the rims and then put the lid back on. You could use a jar sealer attachment and just vacuum seal these if you're gonna be eating them fairly quickly. I prefer to use an oxygen absorber. As the oxygen absorber works, it is going to suck down and seal that lid. So let's go ahead and get the rest of these filled up. I am putting 4 in this one just because it has so much more air than the other containers. Oops, and I forgot to wipe this one off. I will also clean the outsides of the jars of these. I just want to get them sealed before I use water. If you notice your oxygen absorbers getting warm, that is okay. They get warm as they start to activate, but it does mean you should probably move a little faster. So here's a close-up of this bag. I seal it twice. That's just my preference. You may find that unnecessary, but I prefer twice just to be safe. And so this bag contained, it doesn't tell me, but I think it's probably about 100. So it would be really hard to use 100 oxygen absorbers all at one time. So being able to reseal this is super, super helpful to have this impulse sealer. You couldn't use a hair straightener, I wouldn't think anyway, because they're so hot, it would just melt and disintegrate the plastic. So that is one handy thing about the impulse sealer. But long before I had an impulse sealer, I just used my hair straightener. So use what you have, and you can always package these up and put them in a jar. All right, my final step is to get these washed off. I don't want any food on the outsides of jars in my pantry, one, to prevent bugs. And in the case of home canned food, if I find a sticky jar, then I know that that jar was compromised in some way. But I just prefer no food down in my food storage area, unless it's in its package. So let's get these cleaned, then we're gonna label them, and then we'll reconstitute that guacamole. So there are a couple different ways to reconstitute freeze-dried food. Some freeze-dried food you don't need to reconstitute at all. Like we freeze dry apples and bananas and a lot of fruit, and those are just delicious snacks. We don't reconstitute them. Some people weigh their trays before they go into the freeze dryer and then weigh them again when they come out. And the difference is the amount of water that was removed. So then you would add that amount of water to it. I tend to wing it. So with this guacamole, we're just gonna add water until it's about the desired consistency that I would want. And then I'm gonna stick it in the fridge for a little bit. So we're just gonna add water a little bit at a time and mush this up until it is the desired consistency. You can see how fast that starts to rehydrate. I always find it best to go slow because you can always add more water, but you can't take water away. And I am going to get a fork. So if you have large chunks, they're going to take longer to rehydrate than if it was a powder. So let's just add a little bit more. And then let this sit for a bit and then we'll check it. So you can, I don't know if you can hear, but those chunks are still, I can feel that they are not reconstituted when I poke them with the fork. So this guacamole reconstituted beautifully. And I don't normally taste things on camera, but I will for you guys. It's good. Tastes just like guacamole. Yeah, that was delicious. So I don't know about you, but so often we will buy, or I will buy, like I see guacamole on sale and I get a big tub of it, and then it is hard to keep guacamole fresh in your refrigerator. So having the ability to freeze dry guacamole and have it shelf stable and ready to go in my prepper pantry shelves is amazing. So definitely recommend doing guacamole if you have a freeze dryer. And thank you so much for joining me today as we freeze dried guacamole and reconstituted it. If you liked what you saw today, please hit the subscribe button for more homestead, preparedness, and food storage content. Thanks so much for watching today.